Good morning, everybody, and I'm really delighted to be here. It's fantastic to be with this group, and I'm delighted to hear the introductions that we've had from both Pat and Stuart, because it really does help me in the conversation that I'm going to have with you today. So let me tell you a little bit of what I'm going to try and do today. I'm going to really try and cover three things and try and bring this alive in a way in which hopefully can resonate with you and get you thinking about what your role could be when we start talking about sustainability and we start talking about what it means for leadership. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the world we live in. I'm going to talk a little bit about three big trends that we think are really, really important in terms of shaping the world that our leaders are going to have to lead in. And then I'm going to talk to you about the company that I know so well. I've actually worked for Unilever for 38 years. I retired literally 15 days ago, and I'm still going to be working with them and helping them on the talent agenda in Africa and various things like that. But I want to talk to you about their story, and I hope the story resonates. It's just one story in this huge area, but we need many more stories, if I'm really honest with you. Being a citizen of this world, many more Unilever-type stories, as I think Stuart started to illustrate very strongly for us. And then I'm going to close by talking about what does it mean for leaders. What do I think that leaders need to equip themselves with as they look for the next sort of 20, 25 years as we look forward. So I think most of you would know a little bit about Unilever. One of the worst habits that develops if you work for a company for 38 years is when you visit strangers' houses or get invited the first time, you immediately find a way to get to the bathroom, the pantry, the kitchen, and the laundry. And you do a market share test to see whether you were fairly represented. But I'm sure if I visited all your houses, you'd find many of those brands would be in your kitchens, in your pantries, and so on and so forth. Our products are sold in 190 countries around the world. We're a very old company. Our history goes back to 1880, around about that sort of period. Nearly 60% of our business is in the emerging world. And when I was Chief HR Officer, we had 171,000 employees in the organization. The number I want you to remember for the rest of this presentation is 2 billion people use our products every day. So 2 billion people, I'm going to make the case for, are the change agents that can make this world a much more sustainable world as we look forward. So that's a background. And as I said, I'm going to give you this perspective from all I've learned over the last 38 years, but very much from a Unilever perspective and having worked all around the world. The world that we live in today, we describe in our business as a Vuca one. It's not a Unilever term. It, in fact, has its origins in the US Army. And in fact, in the US Army, as I learned this morning, there was another C. And what Vuca stands for is volatile, uncertain, complicated, and ambiguous. And the other C that was in Vuca was chaotic. So V-U-C-C-A, and it was invented by the US Army. And effectively, the world that we live in today is a really volatile, uncertain, complicated, ambiguous world. And we describe that world, and I think if you think about it for a second, as the new normal world in which we live in. And we often joke in our business and said to ourselves that if we went back to a very stable, predictable economic growth, currencies, et cetera, most of our leaders wouldn't know how to manage that environment anymore because we're so used to this turmoil and the change that goes with it. You know, if you really want to get a good feel for that, just look at the first 20 minutes of the news, Sky, BBC, whatever you like, first 20 minutes every single morning. And you'll see a number of global political, social, economic, Vuca events that are just taking place that are reshaping exactly the way we have to do our business. So the starting point I want to give you is that's the new normal world that we live in. And that's the new normal world in which all our leaders are going to have to learn to lead in a very fundamental way. Now, there's three big trends that we think are going to be important over the next 10 or 15 years to shape this Vuca environment. And the first one is that the world is going to continue to move to the east and to the south. There will probably be another 1 billion people on the planet in the next 7 to 10 years. And virtually all of those people are going to live in the east and the south of the world. You know, if you look today, 60% of the world's population is in Asia. And currently, Asia has about 28% of the world's wealth. I think if you just go back 200 years ago, Asia had 60% of the world's wealth. And so I do think, in a way, in a funny way, I think history is going to repeat itself. This is the sheer force of numbers of people, where they're going to be populated in the world. And as they grow and they become middle class and higher income earnings, you're going to see a wealth shift that's also going to take place. 60% of the world's population by 2030, 2035 will live in urban areas. Now, those of you who've traveled extensively, I want you to imagine going to a city like Mumbai, which is probably anywhere between 15 to 18 million people, and just add another 5 or 6 million people onto that. I want you to think of the infrastructure overloads, the chaotic ways in which people are going to have to live. They say by 2035, 1.3 billion people will live in urban slums. That'll be mankind's primary habitat. They also say that probably by 2030, 2035, 600 cities in the world will generate somewhere between 50 to 60% of the world's GDP. So those of you in global organizations, you start to think about maybe we will have an organization that's not a country matrix. You may have a global organization that's just arranged around cities. Okay? It raises tremendous challenges, it raises tremendous opportunities. But sustainability is at the heart of that sort of conversation if you start to think about it. So the first trend to think about is the world is starting to shift. Remember I said to you that Unilever's business currently is about 58% of our businesses in the developing and emerging world. We think by 2022, roughly, about 70% of our business will be outside of Europe and North America. Okay, so shifting really dramatically. The second big trend for us to think about is the digital revolution. And that's with us all the time now, and I think we all actually well embedded in terms of what it means for us. It does mean that we live in an always-on world. We're always accessible 24 hours a day. You know, today there's well over 7 billion mobile telephones in the world today. You know, quite embarrassing for our business, there are less toothbrushes in the world than mobile handsets. Okay? We probably, globally, we think there's about 6 billion toothbrushes sold every year. Okay, so you can think of this wonderful promotion, I buy a cell phone, get a toothpaste and a toothbrush free, and we'll start to grow our business really dramatically as you start to think about it. The collision of technology and information is bringing exponential change in the world today. Social media has become incredibly important. Facebook, I think, is the third most populated country in the world today. Okay, and fast growing even quicker, and soon will be, if it was a country, probably the most populated country in the world today. But Facebook and social media is giving consumers and the citizens of our world unparalleled access to everything. It was interesting on Sky this morning, they were talking about this terrible tragedy we had yesterday in Brussels. And one of the things they were talking about, it was a discussion point, was how quickly people used social media to show people what was going on. Within a minute of the explosions, people were videoing and posting stuff on social media. So social media now has transformed who controls the power in the world. You could argue big corporations, governments, etc., used to control all the information flow, but consumers have unparalleled access to everything that is going on instantly. If you think about President Murabak, he was head of the Egyptian government for 29 years. He was overthrown in 19 days. Facebook to organize it, Twitter to communicate, and YouTube to show the world. Now, if you can do that to a government, you can overthrow corporations like a Unilever, etc., probably in nanoseconds. You know, Patrick was speaking about supply chains, slave labor, etc., instantly available to people. People can vote with their feet instantly. So it's fundamentally changing the way in which we work. And sustainability is right at the heart of that as well. Okay? So sustainability and social media is mobilizing a lot of the social movements that we see around the world. And the third one, which will come as no surprise to you, is that we really are living on borrowed time. The environment is under enormous stress. We talk about in our business the end of the age of abundance. And it really is quite serious. I think it's fundamentally serious, and it's the root cause of much of the social disorder we see in the world. We currently live as if we've got 1.5 planets. If we all lived like we live in North America and Western Europe, we'd need 3 to 4 planets in order for us to live. If you look at some of the statistics, and these are hard to accurately always get right, but by 2035, we'll need 30% more water in the world, we'll need 40% more food, and 50% more energy, okay, to feed those extra billion people that we talk about. And we really don't start from a very good place. 2.7 billion people in this world today already live in water-stressed regions. There are 2 billion people who don't have access at the moment to safe drinking water. There are 1 in 10 people in this world that are obese. There's 1 billion people that go to bed every single night hungry and not knowing when they're going to get their next meal. And the staggering statistic is we throw away every year 1.6 billion euros worth of food, 1.6 billion tons worth of food. Gets thrown away, never reaches the marketplace, etc., etc. So this is really a very serious thing. And for me, at the end of the day, if I think quite hard about this, I think much of the social disorder that we're seeing in the world today has its roots in climate change and sustainability. If you take the Arab Rising and the Tunisia riots, those were started about price hikes because of drought, because of food shortages. If you take about the Syrian crisis, many people say it's a result of 5 years of drought, all youth moving into urban areas, high unemployment, and of course then you get social unrest that is taking place. So each one of these cases, be it the digital revolution, be it the world moving to the east and south, and the environment under stress, really is creating, I think, an incredibly, incredibly strong case for sustainability and making this planet a much more sustainable place. So what does it mean then for business? And what does it mean for business and its leaders? I think as we go into the stage, I think there's also a fascinating debate that's been going for a while where I think people are debating the value of our traditional capitalism. We talk of the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. Many people talk about that as being a crisis of ethics. Trust in business leaders in the world today, politicians and any leaders at the moment, has never been lower in the world today. And I think there's a growing recognition that the challenges that we face at the moment are so big and so complicated and so challenging that you on your own are just not going to be able to solve them. Many governments don't have the ability to solve them. Some of them may not have the will to solve them, but there's a real opportunity for people to step into this space and try and make a difference, because the problems we face are very challenging. Okay? If we genuinely want to make this world a more sustainable one, the challenges we face are very, very significant. So what can business do? And I talk about business from any size, and I'm going to talk about the Unilever choices of what we thought about. I think you've got two choices. You can either just put your head down and just say, look, this is not really my issue at the end of the day, okay, and just continue, if you like, to be a little bit opportunistic about how you run your business. And, you know, from Stuart's charts, you saw many, many companies are still on the wrong side of the wall, either not able to be able to contribute this or not sure how to play a role in this. Or what I think you can do is you can genuinely look reality in the eye and decide you want to become part of the solution. Okay? Businesses can no longer be bystanders, if you like, in the societies and the communities that actually give them their livelihood at the end of the day. So it is a really fundamental step, and that's going to ask you then to do things very differently to the way that you've done them in the past. And so I think what that really means at its heart, it means simply you've got to reconnect with individuals and communities in which you operate and you get your livelihood in a fundamentally different way. It means you need to create very different business models of trying to run your business. And I'm not talking about here corporate social responsibility. Corporate social responsibility, I think, in many organizations sits alongside the business, not inside the business. Stuart spoke about human capital being aligned, not aligned with business strategy, but is the business strategy. Okay, so in the same way, you want to think about these very different models. Moving from being what I call takers in the system to becoming givers in the system. To be provocative, not asking the question, what can I do to take out of the society and communities in which I operate to grow my business profitably and sustainably into the future? To asking the question, what can I put back into the communities and societies in which I operate to grow my business sustainably? Now, many people are talking about this as being a new form, if you like, of social capitalism. It is about taking a long-term view. It is about forgetting about quarterly earnings. You know, when Paul Polman came in, our CEO, who's been very much at the front of this particular initiative, the first thing he did is he abandoned quarterly earnings. He stopped giving guidance to the markets and took away quarterly earnings. Share price went down 6% on the first day. Share price has subsequently doubled since then. Okay? But it really is about taking a long-term view. And in fact, when we talk about our business, we talk about first satisfying our consumers, then our customers, then our suppliers, then our employees. And if we do that really well, our shareholders will be adequately rewarded in the long term. Okay, so it's putting everybody, if you like, on a very, very equal frame as they start to look at it. So Unilever started this journey in 2009, and we would describe ourselves as a purpose-driven organization. And the purpose Unilever has is to make sustainable living commonplace. And we do that by working every single day to create a brighter future with our brands and our services to help people look good, feel good, and get more out of life. So we are a purpose-driven business with three very lofty goals, as you can see on there. The first one is we want to double the business. Okay, so we want to grow, because growth is the only way in which I think we can make a difference. We want to significantly reduce our environmental footprint. So we want to decouple the impact that we have on the environment as we grow. Okay, so decoupling those is really hard. And the third thing we want to do is we want to make a positive social impact to the communities in which we serve. We capture this in a thing we call the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. This is our business model. This is the way we run our business. It touches every single part of our organization. It's not a CSR initiative. It doesn't sit alongside the business. It permeates through everything we do, including the way in which we approach HR, including the way we think about IT, all our supply chains, our brands, our innovation, et cetera, et cetera. And this plan we launched in 2010. And this year, in fact, in May, if you're really interested in it, you can just simply Google Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. Our fifth-year report will go out in May this year for 2015 to have a look at. Now, it has some quite unique features. The first thing is that it covers all our brands in all our countries. Okay, this is not saying we'll only focus on a certain part. Everything is inside that. It talks about life cycle impacts, and I'll show you a video in a second because I really want to bring this alive. And I want you to remember those 2 billion people I spoke about before, and it's holistic in what it does. It covers every aspect of the business, the social side, the economic side, and the environmental side. Now, the lifestyle impact is really important. So let me play you a video now that'll just show you what that means.
A simple tea bag. Every year, consumers use millions of them. All of Unilever's products, including tea bags, go on a journey before and after they are enjoyed by our consumers. We call this the value chain. It works like this. First, we get the raw materials. Then we make them into a product and deliver it to a shop. Then our consumers buy it, use it, and eventually throw it away. But each step in the value chain also has an impact on the environment. Here at Unilever, we want to reduce that impact and grow our business at the same time. The value chain lets us see where our biggest impacts are, so that we can focus our efforts. So for example, Unilever's hundreds of factories only add up to 3% of our total greenhouse gas footprint. Around 25% of our impact comes from suppliers when they produce raw materials, and around 69% comes from the millions of consumers when they enjoy our products. So, most of Unilever's impacts aren't our problem, right? Wrong. We want to reduce the impact of our products before they enter and after they have left our factories. We work as a team with our suppliers, customers, and our consumers to reduce the impact of our products. We have ambitious plans to grow our business, but growth at any cost is not an option. We want to work to help consumers enjoy our products and cut the environmental impact at the same time. Every day, thousands of suppliers help us make our products, and 2 billion people use them. The maths is pretty simple. If we get ourselves, each of our suppliers, customers and consumers to be a little more sustainable, these small actions will add up to a big difference. A really, really big difference.
Okay, I must admit, when I first saw this video, I got quite a fright because I'd, for many years, we used to write a corporate social responsibility report every year, and I used to look at our water reduction coming down and waste coming down and energy coming down and feel enormously proud about the company until I realized that we only control 6 to 8% of the environmental footprint directly, okay? And so when we set out on this route, we said we've got to run the whole value chain, otherwise we're not going to make a difference. So you can see how incredibly important the 2 billion consumers become and how incredibly important all our suppliers become and everybody in this sort of total value chain as we work through it. We set ourselves 3 really big goals. We wanted to help 1 billion people improve their health, hygiene, and well-being. We wanted to halve our environmental footprint. Okay, and I want you to think about that for a second because this is incredibly challenging. And this is halving the environmental footprint means that we'd hold our environmental footprint exactly where it is today, but we'll sell twice as many products. Okay? And so that means the environmental footprint when you and I have a shower, okay, we're going to try and find ways and means of innovating and running that value chain so we have half the impact on water, energy, etc. It's incredibly challenging. And as I'll talk to you in a minute, there's some targets that we're going to find very, very difficult for us to achieve. And the last we want to do is enhance livelihoods. So we have a very strong social pillar. This is about workplace fairness. It's about 5 million women, empowering 5 million women in the value chain, and also looking at 5.5 million smallholders, smallholder farmers, people working in the retail chains, and trying to improve them. Underneath us, we have 50 time-bound targets that we report against. Our results get audited every year by KPMG. Sorry, not by KPMG. We've just changed our auditors, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and published. Okay, so we can't claim anything that we're not doing. This is taken from our last year's report, so this just pulls out the very big sort of pillars. Improving health and well-being. By the end of 2014, we got to 397 million people with programs. I'm going to give you an illustration of one of those. We've also got our food portfolio that's now 33% is now the highest nutritional standards. We hope to double that by 2020. 800 smallholder farmers we've managed to get to. We've got to about 300,000 women, roughly, in terms of empowering them. We produced last year our first human rights report under the new Ruggie framework. I think we're probably the first corporate to be able to do that. These are never easy exercises. We've got things in our extended supply chain. We've worked very closely with Oxfam, for example, in Vietnam to look at what happens down the supply chain. And there's lots of areas that we've still got areas that we need to work on. But we have a report out there. We've set ourselves some targets and some progress that we want to try and move on. On sustainable sourcing, 55% of all our agricultural materials now sourced sustainably. The next 3 pillars, we're doing pretty well on waste. but we have big challenges on water, and we have big challenges for us to go after on greenhouse gas still. Okay, so very open, very transparent in terms of what we're trying to do as we go forward. Now, I spoke to you a minute ago about 2 billion consumers. The way in which we live the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan is through our brands who interact every single day with those 2 billion consumers. And every one of our brands has either developed or in the process of developing what we call a social mission. Okay? And I want to bring this alive, and I want to illustrate just what I mean by talking about a brand having a social mission, because it becomes everything that the brand stands for. Lifebuoy is one of our hygiene soaps. It's basically a hygiene antibacterial soap sold a lot in the developing and emerging world. It's one of the first soaps that Lord Lever invented if you go right back in the 1880s and 1890s. We've got a target of getting to 1 billion people, as I said, improving their hygiene. In the world today, 1.9 million children die from diarrhea before they reach the age of 5. Diarrhea and waterborne diseases. I want you to think about that. That's about 5,000 children a day, okay, are dying just simply from waterborne disease, okay? And bad, if you like, bad habits that develop around that. The World Health Organization did a clinical trial, and they demonstrated that if you can teach children to wash their hands when they come out of the toilet, to wash their hands before they eat, wash hands before preparing food, etc., you can reduce the incidences of that by 40%, okay? By 40%. So Lifebuoy and the people that are working on Lifebuoy, they took their social mission to be to give every child a chance to get to the age of 5, okay? And the people that work on the Lifebuoy brand around the world get out of bed every single day with that thought in mind. The reason they come to work every day is to help every child get to the age of 5. And I want to play you a short video clip which brings us to light, and this will show you once again, it'll go back to my second global trend I spoke to you about, the digital revolution. I want to show you the power of social media when you bring this to life. So let me play.
என் மகன் வளருகிறான் உள்ளங்களிலே இன்பம் பெருகிட மனதில் நிறைகின்றான் தாயும் தந்தையும் விரும்புவதெல்லாம் ஒன்னேதானுங்க ஐயா ஒன்னேதானுங்க கண்ணுக்கு கண்ணான தான் பெத்த பிள்ளை துள்ளி விளையாடியே மனதை மகிழச் செய்யணுங்க மகிழச் செய்யணுங்க தெய்வம் தந்த செல்வமையா நான் பெற்ற செல்வமையா ஆரோக்கியமும் அறிவும் பெற்று வளர்ந்துட்டானையா மனம் மகிழ்ந்தோமையா நாமே மனம் மகிழ்ந்தோமையா இந்த மகிழ்ச்சியின் வேதனை எதுவும் மறைந்திடும் ஐயா ஐயா நாளொரு மேனியும் பொழுதொரு வண்ணம் என் மகன் வளருகிறான் உள்ளங்களிலே இன்பம் பெருகிட மனதில் நிறைகின்றான்
मेरा बच्चा 5 साल का हो गया।
इतना सब 5 साल में कौन सी बड़ी बात है?
बड़ी बात है मैडम, ये गुंडापा का पहला बच्चा है जो 5 साल की उम्र तक पहुंचा है।
क्या?
Okay, so that's a really good example of a brand with a purpose, okay? Each one of our brands is trying to find their way. Dove, for example, is focused on self-esteem amongst young women. Domestos is focusing on sanitation, particularly in the developing emerging markets. Sunlight, which is a big dishwash brand, is focusing on water, safe access to drinking water. But the power of this, when you connect it to a brand, each one of those brands are the fastest growing brands in Unilever. So it really makes really good business sense for us as well. Now, the type of model that I've described to you today is a Unilever perspective on how it can make a difference. And I would argue, and what I really would plea with, is that what we need to do is we need to find every organization, big or small, to find its own way in helping it to create, a much more sustainable world, be it NGOs, governments, whoever it might be. It's big. The challenges we face are huge. On our own, we simply can't do them. I actually think that the type of business model that I've described to you today, many people say, well, that's fantastic competitive advantage for Unilever. And I'd argue with you, and I say to you, particularly in the HR space at the moment, enormous competitive advantage. I have no problem getting young people to come and work in Unilever at the moment, okay? But I would also argue with you and say to you, I think in a very short time, 5 or 10 years, running a business with this type of business model will be like paying your school fees. I don't think you'll have a license to operate in the world unless you're making a contribution along the sort of lines that we've made. Okay, and the reason we're doing this is because we passionately believe this is the only way we'll be able to grow our business profitably and sustainably into the future. If the world runs out of water, Unilever doesn't have a business. It's as simple as that at the end. So there's lots of self-interest in this, but equally so, there's lots of, if you like, do good, but I do think making the world more sustainable is better. Right, so let me get to what does it mean now for business leaders. I'm just going to give you just a view from where I'm sitting at the moment, where Unilever is sitting, about what we think is really important. We spend a lot of time and working with some of the leading academics, started in 2013, leading academics. We spoke to a lot of young people, in fact, as well. Young One World is a big conference that's run. It was run here in Dublin the year before last. And we engaged with them. We sent about 50 or 60 of our young managers there about saying, what do you think leaders will need in order to manage this VUCA world? And we came up with sort of 6 things, okay, that we think are incredibly important. And this is just one perspective. You can call this a leadership compass, if you like, that we have. And many of you will have very different attributes that you may think are really important. But let me run through them very quickly to give you an idea. The first one, I think, is values and purpose. And I was delighted to see, Patrick talk about value, and I'm talking about values in a leader. Okay, never has the world now, I think, needed more as values-based leaders. Okay, we need leaders who are principle-based and ask themselves the question, not can I do it, but should I do it? Okay, we don't need leaders who are rule-based leaders. We need value-based leaders who are deeply rooted in purpose, and it's the foundation of everything that they do. I'm often struck by Viktor Frankl's quote that suggested when we built the Statue of Liberty on the East Coast, they should have built the Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. Okay, if you want to lead in today's world, you've really got to take the responsibility and the accountability that goes with it. So the fundamental starting point is deeply rooted in values and purpose. We need values-based leaders wherever we go. The first thing I think they'll also need to be is they need to be authentic. I think people in the world will just assume all our leaders are authentic. The level of distrust in the world now is so high that going forward, people are going to you're going to have to be authentic if you want a license to operate. If you think about, because these problems are big and difficult to solve, you're going to have to start working with many different stakeholders as a business leader. What Unilever has found in the last 10 years is we've had to work, and willingly actually worked with, lots of NGOs who previously we wouldn't work with, Oxfam, Greenpeace, et cetera, et cetera. But in order for you to do that, your leadership's got to be authentic, otherwise you'll never be trusted. And if you're not trusted, we're not going to make a difference to solving some of these really big challenges. So authenticity is going to be incredibly important as a leader, having authentic leaders wherever we go. The next one is this ability to adapt. If you think of the VUCA world I've described, you're just going to see disruption after disruption after disruption everywhere that you look. Where technology and information are starting to collide, you're getting this exponential change that's taking place. And so disruptive competitors are going to come at your businesses, and they've probably not even been identified yet. There are people going to eat your lunch that you never thought would come and eat your lunch. That's how fast this world is moving. So you're going to need leaders who are incredibly adaptive, leaders who can change course quite quickly, incredibly agile, very comfortable with the level of absolute change that they're going to do, and actually learn from disruption, learn really quickly from disruption, and work out what they're going to do. The third one I think we're going to have to develop in all our leaders is massive sense of resilience. If you think about the VUCA world again, we're going to have to experiment much more, and that means we're going to have to take many more risks. Somebody said to me not long ago, they said, the biggest risk you take today in running a business is not taking a risk. because the businesses in the world is moving so quickly. And if that's the case, and you're going to have to experiment more often, it means you're probably going to fail more often. So resilience as a leader, first of all, is how fast do you bounce back having failed? How quickly you bounce off the canvas? Imagine if you're a boxer, do you crawl out the side of the ring, or do you bounce back and you come back and have another go? So how high do you bounce? How resilient are you to be able to do that? And more importantly, as a leader, can you build resilience in your organization? Because your organization is going to have to become incredibly resilient for the world in which we've got. This is probably the biggest challenge I think that most leaders will face as they go forward, this ability to be able to think systemically about the world. You know, we're faced with so many conflicting signals in the world, with so much data that's crashing into us all the time. You know, I often joke about the guy who came into my office and said, must be 30 years ago, I'm going to give you Outlook, I'm going to give you email. It is going to simplify your life and make things so easy. If I could find that guy, I would probably shoot him today, I think, at the end of the day. Because simplistic, the data overload that we all have to deal with every day. So how do you find leaders who can work their way through these conflicting signals, join the dots, have the courage to make a decision, the courage to mobilize an organization, and then execute? And I think this ability to think systemically is probably the biggest skill that we need to teach our leaders as we start to look forward. And the last one is we are always going to need leaders who are results-orientated. But the results-orientated leaders of the future, I think the results they're going to be judged on are going to change. You know, just in the way we saw a scorecard a little bit earlier that starts to look at the values. I think societal KPIs will become very important. The environmental KPIs will become important. And leaders will be judged in a very different way. Their results will be transparent. They'll be judged much quicker. And I think what you'll find is, you know, leaders, there's a good debate going on about will leaders last longer in their roles or shorter in the results as a result of this that's going forward. So these are the areas that we've called out that I think are the sort of areas that we think are very important. We're building these skills in the organization through a mixture of, a little bit like the very first speaker today, we have our own unique way of doing things, but a little bit through, you know, good academic stimulus that we give to our leaders, and then we put them through, if you like, 10 weeks of trying to solve some of the biggest problems Unilever have got, to try and teach them to think systemically. They then come back and present to the board, and we either take the ideas or we don't. And we slowly but surely cascade this down through all the leadership programs. It's a start. I'm not sure it's absolutely perfect in any way, but we think these are the sort of skills that we think our leaders are going to need to lead in a Vuca world and to make it more sustainable. One of the questions I get asked quite a bit is, you know, how do we make sustainable living commonplace, and where do you start? Okay? And so just to finish, I thought I'd share with you just 3 charts at the end of the day. The first one is it starts at the top. If you don't have the top leadership team, the board and the top leadership team passionately talking about sustainability as being a core way in which they run the business, it's just not going to work. It's not going to come bottom up in the organization. You need role models at the top of the organization who are perpetually talking about, you know, how we do our business, our behaviors, the impact that it's having, and the things that we're going to do to try and make a difference as we go forward. So it's critical for leaders to lead this process from the top of the end. So if I take our own case with Unilever, 2008, 2009, new CEO came into the organization and really brought with us and actually captured the heritage of Unilever and started this journey for us. We've always had this in our DNA, but he's fundamentally brought this to life. And this is owned passionately by the top team. The second thing I think you need to be is you need to be hell of a courageous. Okay? To be honest with you, one of the debates we had, you know, at the time with the board is how can we go out and say we're going to halve our environmental footprint? How can we declare that publicly? How can we say we're going to double our business? How can we set ourselves 50 targets? Okay, but you need to be courageous. This is about ambition, and we're not sure if we're going to get all of those 50 targets. We're going to have a good go at trying to get every single one of them. But boy, if we could get to 80% of them or 90% of them, it would be a fantastic effort. But you need to be courageous, okay? And you need to be incredibly committed. This is not something you can start and then walk away from a year later because it didn't really feel good, okay? So courage is incredibly important, and that's from the top of the organization down through the management ranks. And the last thing which I found fantastic being the head of HR is how do I get into 170,000 employees, into their hearts and minds, the concept of the Unilever Sustainable Living Plan, and allow them to find their contribution, their purpose. Okay? And if I just described to you the Lifebuoy campaign, for example, some of our factory workers in remote rural areas will take hand washing kits and go back into their villages and teach schools and school children about how to do it. And they're making a contribution to making the world more sustainable. So you need to find a way in which you can bring it alive for all of your employees. So it's not just a lip service to it, but it actually is deeply felt in the soul and deeply felt in the head as they go forward. The question I'm going to ask all of you, though, to close, okay, is just to say to you, as you think about what I've said today, what's your contribution going to be to making sustainable living commonplace? As I said to you, Unilever passionately believes this is the right business model to allow us to grow our business profitably and sustainably into the future. But, I think there's many more different types of organizations that need to get on and find their way in which they think they can make a huge contribution to making this world sustainable. And in a learning institution as we're in today, then I think creating the right leaders to live in and lead in a sustainable world is going to be a really important thing to do. Thanks very much.